What's up, everybody?
Hello!
Welcome to Movie Boners. What beer are you drinking today, my good man?
Ooh. Well, that's interesting. Okay. All right.
Oh, that's good.
The beers we had for the last episode that we recorded were quite the stretch to try and connect. Yeah. In fact, they kind of just really didn't connect to the episode.
Yeah.
But we tried. So
that's all you can do sometimes.
So I felt like, okay, I gotta, like, let's put forth a little effort. Like, I'm
totally
gonna find
redeem
something.
Yourself.
Yeah, and totally redeem ourselves. I think I did. I think I found maybe, I'm not gonna say the perfect, but it's pretty fucking good, and it's pretty good. I am drinking Wonder Boy.
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
It's a German style wheat ale.
Okay.
From Red Horn Brewing Company in Cedar Park, Texas. It's not bad. It's not bad at all.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
I also tried harder than last time, and I went with, from the Loveland Aleworks Brewing Company, it's called Haze Bros of the Galaxy. And it is a hazy IPA brewed with citrus, Simcoe, and Galaxy hops.
All right.
Hops. And yeah, that's, you have to say it like McFogle or whatever his name is. Fogel.
McLovin.
McFogle. Yeah, and it is very, very good, actually. It's from Loveland, Colorado. It's very good.
Nice. All right.
So, before we get into much else, quickly check in on the movie draft.
I'm shocked you want to.
I gotta say, I think it was last episode that I started being cheeky about taking the lead. Mm-hmm. And it was because you didn't have any movies released yet. Mm-hmm. And it took one movie releasing for you to completely take the lead.
No, not even a movie, but like mediocrity completely overtook you, dude.
Yeah. Well, Bob Marley, One Love is bigger than I thought it would be. I didn't expect it to have 120 million already after 1 week, week and a half, I guess. But yeah, 6.5. It's definitely pretty darn big. Critics, I think this is the thing that got me last season. So far, not doing great. Critics don't really care for it, but audiences love it. Probably predictably, but it's a good feel-good movie.
Not surprised by that.
Yeah,
I am actually surprised that Argyle kind of has ended up where it has. That's kind of a bummer, honestly, to me.
Yeah.
It
never really took off. Still sitting at around 86 million. That's probably where it will die.
I was gonna say, I think that's probably where it's going to end.
Yeah, nothing much happening after that. And Drive Away Dolls, which was just a bench warmer for me, so it doesn't matter too much. Mm-hmm. But Dune Part 2 is coming up pretty fast. I guess it will have been out. So when this episode comes out, it will have been out for a little bit. But I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, I'm not one to really look at or put any stock into early reviews or whatnot. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But seeing some of the stuff being said about Dune Part 2, I was like, well, at least I got to have 1 week where I'm going to kick Jake's ass, because I'm kind of feeling that when Dune Part 2, like you said, when this releases, it's already out. I think it's going to be big.
Gangbusters.
Yeah,
it definitely could be. I haven't really looked at any of the pre-sales or anything, but I think it'll be pretty big.
I think it's going to be big.
That kind of goes without saying, being my number one overall pick, but I think it'll be big.
Yeah.
I guess other announcement-y things. There's a lot of stuff going on Instagram these days. So if you're not following us on Instagram and on YouTube, I'm trying to put everything that is interesting also on YouTube. check us out there. The way we communicate basically is through Instagram. So if you're on there, very cool. If you're a new listener, we've had quite a bit of new followers based on some of the stuff from the end of last year. The top 10 when we were young, things kind of blew up on us, and that was very cool. So we really appreciate it if you're here for the first time. Yeah, feel free to connect. We're super open, super low key, and love hearing from you about all kinds of stuff, whether it's a movie you're watching or an episode topic, or you listen to this crazy episode from 2 years ago that we did and you have thoughts, you can still share them. We don't mind going back. So yeah, that's pretty much all of that. What new stuff have you seen lately?
All right, so lately, not that much. Finally saw The Iron Claw, which I know was a big one for you. And I am in total agreement with you. That movie was incredible. Zac Efron puts on quite the performance in that film. That was a great film. I am still a little bitter, though, because you bragged to me about this wonderful theater experience that you had, where you got to just be immersed in the film, no distractions, period.
I was the only person there at 10 in the morning, and I snuck in 2 beers, and I just had the best time laughing at them, crying, and all the emotions at the movie.
And see, I'm the kind of guy that or moviegoer that I like a crowded theater. I like it full. That's my experience. I want everyone to have that same, just to share it. What I'm not down for is fucking people being on their phones during the movie.
Oh yeah,
and the way the seating was, because the theater was pretty full when I saw it. So there were 3 people. This mom, she brought her 2 young boys in. They sat on my left and she sat on my right because they must have decided,
split up. Yeah.
There's 3 seats. We'll just make it awkward for this one filled chair.
And because the kids don't want to sit with their mom.
Right.
Old enough that it's not cool.
Well, they were texting each other throughout the movie. I was trying not to yell and ruin it for everyone else because I was like, I'll suffer. The movie's good. I can just get through this.
Block it out.
Yeah. But hey, parents, if your kids tell you that they want to go and see a movie about wrestling, maybe do just a quick little watch a trailer or something and understand that the Iron Claw is not a WWE event kind of movie. It's historical, sad family tragedy. Your kids are probably not going to understand it, and they're probably not going to really dig it. So, bad experience, but great movie. And then I saw Wonka with my daughter and had the opposite theater experience. That movie was delightful. I had no hope for it and came out just absolutely loving it. I told my daughter when the movie got out, I was like, I knew pretty quick into that movie of I'm gonna really dig this movie. I'm gonna be a fan. And that happened. I was not expecting it, but I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I love that it's a musical. The songs are catchy. They're fun. The story is really cool. Timothée Chalamet, he's a good Wonka. I liked him as Wonka.
Is he?
Yeah. And I don't know too much.
Timothée Chalamet fan, but
yeah. I really know him only from Dune, I guess. Dune and Wonka. So, and then I saw American Fiction.
Oh yeah,
that movie, Jake, was fucking hilarious. That movie is so good.
Is it?
It's so good.
I am really intrigued by it. It looks good.
I will say the marketing for it is a little misleading.
Okay.
In a way.
Good to know.
But I don't want to go too much into how it's misleading because it's something you just got to watch the movie play out and the story play out.
Okay.
It's so good. It's so funny. And I really hope more people get around to seeing this movie because there's a whole generation of people that need to see this movie and learn how to just kind of shut the fuck up. So,
yeah, that's mostly why I'm interested in it. It sounds like a fantastically anti-woke, like
It is.
storytelling that hasn't come out of. You wouldn't expect to be a major movie and a major award season movie
Right.
and all
Oh,
that stuff.
there's not it doesn't have a shot in hell of winning any awards because it really is so anti-woke in some of the best ways. It's just,
It's
oh my
fantastic.
God. I was loving the movie the whole way through. It's great.
I love Jeffrey Wright. He's fantastic. So I think it should be great.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch it.
What about you, sir?
I watched a handful of things as well. I watched, speaking of award season movies, I watched Anatomy of a Fall, which is, I guess, foreign language. It's half English, but also half French. And it was good. It was a really slow. And so if you like crime dramas, I think you would like it. If you want like a thriller, not so much. It's not like a Gone Girl type thing. It's more like I don't know, something super slow. But I did find it super fascinating because it like takes place in France, and the woman who's being investigated because her husband is found dead. He just like fell out of the house from a second story or third story or whatever, and they find him in the snow. They investigate her to see if she did it or if he committed suicide or what the story is. That's the whole movie. But she ends up in court, and the French court system, I don't know if it's accurate. I assume it's accurate in the movie. It's really fascinating because it's a lot more like conversational.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no like this, the American system, from TV is so like rigid, and you can't say the wrong thing or you object and you have to like throw that out. And then this person goes and then that person goes, and it's so coordinated and orchestrated, I guess. This was very like free flowing conversational. Like the prosecutor will just ask the witness, and then the defendant will start talking and answering questions, or interject, and the defense lawyers then start talking. It's just very much like, it seems like they're all trying to get down to the bottom of it, even though the prosecutors are very much prosecuting and trying to like accuse her of something and prove something. It's still kind of conversational. So I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if it's best screenplay good, but it was pretty good. And then I watched A Haunting in Venice, which is the Hercule Poirot third detective movie. And I liked it quite a bit. I liked it, I think, a little bit more than the first two. I think more the vibe of the Halloween in Venice, mm-hmm. and the mix of the logic of the detective with the mystical spirits of the what he's investigating. I thought was very interesting. So I liked it quite a bit. And I liked the cast a lot. And then I think the last thing I watched is a bizarre movie that I don't know anybody's ever heard of from 2013, but I loved it. It's called Coherence, and it's weirdly directed and co-written by the writer of Rango, the animated Johnny Depp Lizard movie. But it's kind of like a Primer in the sense that it's based on theoretical physics. Mm-hmm. Like theories and stuff. There's an event where there's a comet going overhead, and it's just about this dinner party about these friends that get together, and then really strange things start happening. And I think it's a little more accessible than Primer because you don't really have to understand everything, like the physics stuff and the sciencey stuff,
right?
Because all of the people at the dinner party don't really know either. There's one guy who has a brother that kind of knows some of this stuff that they kind of try to explain what they think might be going on. But most of them don't know, so it's okay if you don't know also. And it's really, really interesting. I've been thinking about it for days and days and days since seeing it. So it's all right. I would highly recommend Coherence. There's nobody you recognize in it. It was made for like $50,000. They didn't even submit it to the MPAA to get a rating. It's just a fantastic little original movie. When a lot of people are complaining there aren't any original movies, this is a really good one to seek out. So I would recommend Coherence for sure.
All right.
Okay. I think that's all we got.
I think so too. Right?
So you want to get into this episode?
Oh, let's do it.
So with Dune Part 2 coming out, we were thinking, let's go back, because I had never seen
the original either.
Yeah, we never saw the original David Lynch Dune. I haven't read the books either. I don't think you have.
I read the first book.
Have you?
Yeah, I read the
Okay.
first book a few years ago.
That's good, because I'm going to have questions for you after seeing this
That's
version.
that's not good because I didn't memorize the book. Like,
but you'll probably remember if there was some weird standout thing, which is mostly the things I want to ask you
there
about.
was yeah, I found myself kind of wishing that I would have reread the book recently.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot in this that I was like, I don't remember that. Did I
Yeah.
not read
That was that was basically my whole experience because, well, first of all, off the top, David Lynch directed it and wrote the screenplay for it.
Right.
And I went through his whole filmography. I was like, because if you've listened to the podcast for a fair amount of time, we complain about Mulholland Drive and how we don't get it or really like it quite often.
It's a pretty terrible film. Just
I was scrolling through, but people love it, and people are adamant David Lynch fans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even people complain about us that we're like Zack Snyder fans, like part of a cult. The David Lynch fans are borderline.
But the David Lynch
too.
fan base is pretty.
He's put out over 100 episodes of him reading the weather, and people like have rated it super high. Like, people love David Lynch for some reason. That's a web series that he made and wrote and directed, quote unquote. But I went through his whole filmography. I was like, what else have I seen besides Mulholland Drive of his? And I haven't seen anything else. And so I was like, I've seen Mulholland Drive and I've seen Dune. And both of those movies, there's weird stuff in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of my questions for you are going to be, I don't know how much of the weirdness in this movie is because David Lynch is a weirdo. And also how much of it is because maybe the book is
the book has some weird things, but I think so.
He adapted very faithfully, and that's very possible. And also, it could just be weird because it's the 80s, and the 80s were
I think
also.
It's a big combination of a whole lot of things. The 80s being the start, David Lynch being another one, and then studio interference being a big part of it. I read a thing where Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, actually said he liked the original Dune from David Lynch. He said it told the story well enough. I enjoyed it. It is what it is.
Okay. That's something.
I'm definitely going to come right out and just say, like, thank God for the 2021 version, because I think it tells the story of Paul Atreides way better. I think it's way more patient. Obviously, the effects are better, but that's not what stands out to me. I think the David Lynch version has some of the weirdest pacing in a movie. And I found myself really being like, because I'll be straight. I didn't really like the 80s Dune. I really wasn't digging it like at all.
That's fair. And on my side, I didn't really dig it either. Like, I felt a little bad because we're only a month or two into 2024, and I've already gotten you to watch two different weird 80s sci-fi movies. I was like, maybe we should give Dustin a break from these weird sci-fi movies. But I definitely was watching it, and there were times I was like, how long is this scene going to go on for? Because it focuses on weird things. Like, it's not just that the pacing is off, and that's understandable, I think, because like you said, there was a lot of studio interference that David Lynch had like a 4-hour cut, and then they cut it down to just over 2 hours, 2 hours 15, I think. And so there are definitely things that he probably would have wanted to pace better, but the end result is a movie that is, it rushes through a lot of it. The first like 90 minutes is equivalent to the story that you get in Denis Villeneuve's 2.5 hour version. So he adds on another hour to the story. And then the last 45 minutes of the original version is more stuff that I felt was like basically a sneak preview of what we'll see in Denis Part 2.
The way I took it was like, this feels like he got caught up in the slowest part of the story, which is the setup. So the whole prophecy of Paul, the whole like doing the box
test, there's a lot to get through. So
the betrayal of the house, right? And the beginning of it, I was kind of like, okay, this, I was recognizing a lot of it from the book and from the 2021 version, and just being like, okay, so we're basically doing the same thing. But there was a lot already that I was like, this is just not right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last 45 minutes of the movie, to me, it went from like, or it felt like he spent so much time and then realized like, oh shit, they're not going to let me like do sequels to this. Although he had 2 sequels planned and had signed on for 2 sequels. But it almost felt like he went, oh fuck, okay, so I have to get Love Story in, I have to get The Rebellion in, I have to get this fight in, I have to get Writing Worms in. And it just like the last 45 minutes to me just felt like bullet points. Like bullet point moments.
Summary.
And just Paul does this, Paul did this.
Checking boxes. This. Yeah. Just like, yeah.
Oh. End credits. We're good. I found myself really just being like, am I just being a little extra harsh because it's David Lynch, and Mulholland Drive put such a bad taste in my mouth with his stuff? Same with kind of Twin Peaks, because the more I think about Twin Peaks, when I watched it didn't bother me. It like weirdly sucked me in because I couldn't figure out what the fuck was going on, and it's such a weird soap opera. But the more time passes and the more I've thought about it or talked about Twin Peaks, the more I realize like I really did not like that show. I just apparently wanted to suffer for however many episodes it fucking was.
Yeah.
So watching Dune, I was like, am I just kind of being biased and like,
is that the only David Lynch things you've seen?
Yeah.
You haven't seen like Elephant Man or any of his other big ones?
No.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So I was kind of like, I had to kind of check myself of like, are you just hating it because it's David Lynch, or are you just really not feeling this version? And so I did watch it a couple times. And the second time I was doing my usual process that I do when we're prepping for stuff. And when I started finding the studio interference crap that was coming up a lot, and how Lynch has said it's like the worst experience he's ever had during production on a film, thanks to the studios and him being forced to cut out so much. And basically his vision was completely stripped away. And he even said at one point, he never even actually got to show Final Cut or have Final Cut. That was already decided before he even like started filming. So I was like, okay.
If the director doesn't have Final Cut, it's like not even really their movie.
Right. So I kind of like, I'm not going to hold my dislike for the OG Dune against David Lynch, which I feel I will always have to clarify because his name, being director, his name is always going to be associated with it.
He did the stuff that we got. He did direct it and wrote it and made it, whether there's other stuff that was missing or things that would have made it better. The stuff on the screen he did make, and the stuff on the screen is weird.
It's very weird. Like I still don't know what I was more weirded out by. Patrick Stewart's weird long hair, or
I've never seen him with long hair before.
It was
I've never seen him with hair, period.
It was so distracting. And I was like, wait, why did they give long hair to a bald man? Like, just shave it. He doesn't need the hair.
He was probably the most recognizable person in the movie. And I'm sure other fans of sci-fi in the 80s would feel the same way. And he has like 3 scenes.
I know.
He maybe has a minute and a half total of runtime.
His character was kind of like, to me, kind of another bullet point of, oh shit, we have Patrick Stewart. You have to put him back on screen. Like, oh crap, you're right, we do. The weird body shield, which looks really cool in the 2021 version. It's sleek. It's like interesting. And this was something that I remembered immediately from the book, because in the book, when you read about this like suit shield thing that they have. It's pretty cool. It's kind of hard to imagine, and seeing the 2021 take on it, I was like, okay, that connects for me. Seeing the 80s version where it's just like the worst boxy, weird 80s CGI, I was just like, what the fuck is happening?
I laughed out loud when those things turned on, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I've seen bad digital effects in movies a lot. I don't think I've seen anything like computer generated effect that was that bad in a movie ever. And for this to be a significant like space epic, like I totally get it. You're reading the book and you're imagining this really amazing thing that you just can't really make, but get a little more creative or do something that actually
instead
looks
of
good.
weird
I was like,
body boxes.
Yeah. Like not only was it weird Gumby like boxes of polygons that are covering them, but they're also like barely transparent, and so you can't really see anything. And there's like a fairly important things that happen where they're like fighting each other, and when like the slow knife goes through, like it's more important in the new version when kind of everybody has these shields, but the 80s version, I guess, like they only use them like once in the whole movie, so it doesn't really matter. But there's a time when he's like, look down, I would have had you too, and I'm like, I can't see shit, I don't know what you're talking about. Like all I see is like this warped image of a person inside of it. It looks so silly. It's like a PS1 rendering of a polygon.
Oh, it's not even PS1. It's like
a Dreamcast,
Atari, or
yeah.
It's like, you know what it is? That bodysuit had to have been the inspiration for all of Minecraft.
Yeah, it's that blocky. It's like exactly when you see the little Minecraft guy's legs go like this. That's exactly what their legs look like when those shields are turned on.
It is the weirdest. It's so odd. Yeah,
I was terrible.
When they turned on, I didn't laugh out loud, but I definitely had the audible of like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, so I imagine if you were a fan of the book and you saw things like that, you would be so incredibly disappointed in this version, because you can imagine something better than that.
And the Baron seemed to be like exaggerated unnecessarily to me, with the whole doctor working on the disease on his face and shit. Like,
he was like more of a comedic comic book villain in my mind. Like the Baron is the most improved character in the between this version and the 2021 or whatever 2011 Denis Villeneuve version, because the difference between this guy and his pussy face and the first time you see him is in that super brightly lit green room, and you can't really tell what the purpose of all the different, like the plants in there for, and the people that are coming in, and it's just so weird. And like the first time he starts flying and floating around and stuff, and he does that a lot. He actually flies a lot in this movie. I was just flabbergasted that this is what they came up with for this villain. It's not intimidating at all. It's not scary. It's not. He's pretty like useless as a villain. The actual like the Emperor, and then the guys that come in that like own the Emperor, which we'll get around to, they are way scarier than the Baron is. And so to jump over to the actual like new version with Skarsgård and his like formidable presence and the way he floats, I'm like, he floats in a way that you're like, oh shit, not in a way you're like, oh, that's silly.
You're like, this kind of looks like a demented bad trip version of the Wonka chocolates at the
I was going to say,
or the soda pop. It's a soda pop that they drink that makes them fly. Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. That of like, oh, this was like if Charlie and his uncle took a bad shroom or something.
It's his grandpa
or grandpa. Yeah, I said uncle, didn't I?
Grandpa Joe. Yeah,
Grandpa Joe.
Yeah, he's dreadful. That's a dreadfully bad villain in that.
Yeah, the there was a few things like I don't remember, and if you've listened to our show long enough, or or know us, outside the show,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like, I'm a fan of sci-fi. I like
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi, but it's never been my like favorite genre.
Go
It's
to.
not my
Yeah.
go-to. And that includes the books. Like I have some sci-fi books. I really like the Expanse series, and I remember enjoying the first Dune,
Mm-hmm.
but not investing as much into it.
Okay.
So it didn't like stick
Did
in
you
my
like
mind.
the Denis Villeneuve's version of the movie better than you liked the book?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did. I'm
Just
excited to
curious.
see how he develops it more.
Yeah.
And having seen this version of Dune now I'm like, oh, so I know what's coming up in part 2.
More or less. Yeah.
Yeah,
Has to
more or
be.
less. But right, I had to laugh at myself because I was like, oh, spoiler alerts, but that's okay, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine some things will be different. I think the most notable thing for me is that the way that the new version ends is with that knife fight with
Yeah.
the Fremen, whatever. And this movie also ends with a knife fight, the 80s version, but it's kind of very different contexts and very different stakes.
Oh my god, the fucking Sting.
We'll
Like
get to Sting. We're not going to jump to Sting right now.
fucking Sting.
And Sting his banana hammock and all of that good stuff.
It's just so...
But the thing that was interesting to me, from the very beginning, the opening narration
the narration.
Okay, there's a couple of things. There's two different kinds of narration that we have to talk about.
Yeah.
But the opening narration with the lady, the girl, the daughter of the emperor. First of all, I'm going to say, for all of you aspiring artists out there, if you're
Did you just
building a
say
world,
expiring?
well, you might be expiring, but
Do
I
you
hope you're
mean
just
aspiring?
aspiring. I do mean aspiring. Please don't expire too early. I hope you are an aspiring artist. And if you are an aspiring artist, if you're going to make a world that is very rich and complex and has a lot of lore and different planets with names and houses of families with names, you don't need to start your movie with some other chick that you introduce by name that has no point whatsoever to do with the story. She's like adjacent to the story because she's the daughter of the emperor. I did find it interesting that you see the emperor in this and you don't see that in
Right.
the new version, and we'll get to that. But she doesn't matter at all. She has a scene where she walks through, the emperor looks at her, he's like, hey daughter, you should get out of here, and
Right,
she's like,
you need
peace
to
out.
leave. Okay.
Yeah, it's more like, hey, remember me from the narration at the opening credits a minute
with
ago?
my weird floating head in the stars, like
Yeah, it's like, and it like fades in and out, and she tells you everything you need to know. But the thing that was really interesting to me is that I then rewatched the new version after I had watched the 80s one a couple of times, and I haven't seen the new version in at least a year or so.
okay.
And so I didn't remember everything. I remembered some certain things, but the thing I didn't realize, and I thought was interesting, in the new version, they use a lot of the exact same storytelling devices, a lot of the exact same, like the pacing is similar as far as the like opening lead up and everything.
Mhm.
There's a lot of junk that Denis Villeneuve doesn't bother showing you or adding in, but for the most part, the opening narration is all there in the new
Yeah.
version. It's just not a weird floating what's that chick's name? Zendaya? Is that
Yeah.
the whoever's narrating, that girl, Chani, whatever her name is? And so she's narrating it, but there's it's over the imagery of like the battles and the planets,
Mhm.
and you get an idea of the scope and the locations and the context and stakes and all that stuff. And so it's showing you interesting visual things as you kind of like are taking in all of this stuff, plus the additional narration and information that they're sharing with you. And I was like, that's way better. You're giving me all the same information, but doing it in a much, much better way than having me sit here and stare at this chick's head fade in and out.
Well, and I felt like with with the OG Dune, that whole opening where they're giving you the narration and kind of like the history of like the planets or the houses and all that. I kind of, I had to laugh and was like, am I supposed to be taking down like notes? Like,
yeah, there will be a test.
Right. Like, is this like a lecture? Shit. House Atreides is on planet Arrakis.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's how it felt with even like, because they do that thing. I get what they were trying to do, but the execution is just so weird to me because it totally felt like a high school science class where it goes from like her giving you the narration and some of the history, and then it's like, and here's a screenshot of the 3 planets with the houses with the different names, and make sure you.
It was very much like, it's very much like there are 4 different planets and 4 different groups that you need to be concerned about for this movie. And make sure you memorize this and don't forget it.
Right.
And I don't know how much of that is like studio interference, because that is a big part of this. And it could certainly be that people came in, they're like, people are not going to understand what the fuck this movie's about. So you need to put in all of this extra hand holding so that they get
the hand holding. Yeah. So her narrating, it felt like sheets getting put on a projector screen. Kids, look that up for like old high school projectors. Between all that and then the fucking inner monologue of every character that we had to listen to for 2 hours and 17 minutes.
It is the weirdest device, and that definitely felt like it had to be studio interference of like.
It reminded me of fucking Blade Runner, the theatrical cut where it has the voiceover because they were like, people can't figure stuff out, so we have to spoon feed and hold their hand the entire film. That was probably one of the most glaring, like, this is terrible decision making.
Yeah.
Like, kind of comparisons to 2021 and this one, because Villeneuve definitely relies on the audience to be able to just read your character. The actors are going to give off what they're thinking through their body language, and you might not know it exact, but your average audience is going to be smart enough to be able to like figure out, oh, they're uncomfortable. Ooh, they're really.
And it's literally the actor's job to convey that. Like, that's what I thought while I was watching it. I was like, this is kind of really disrespectful of the actors that you don't feel like they can convey the fact that, like, it's the simplest thing. Like, for example, Max von Sydow, the guy that's in charge of overseeing the change on Arrakis, there's a point where the Duke is like, forget about the spice. We don't care about the spice. We need to get these guys off the ship. And his inner monologue is like, I can believe that he cares more about the men. But he also, everything is whispered when it's an inner dialogue. He's like, he cares about the men more than the spice. It's amazing. And I'm like, it's amazing. The simplest thing. Yeah. Like, compared to Denis Villeneuve's, you see the Duke, you kind of learn who he is and what he cares about, and then you get to Arrakis and you get to put him in that situation, and then you just tell that actor, hey, act a little surprised, but also a little bit have a little admiration for this guy that is trying to save these people, and the audience gets what you're going for. You don't have to tell them point blank all these things.
Right. We don't have to hold the audience's hand over every little thing that we're going to show. Yeah. I was shaking my head so much during that.
I complain about that, but then I also had the thought that while I was watching it, I'm not completely sure if I hadn't already seen the new version and knew the story, if I would have fully understood the story in this movie. Like, I do think audiences are smart and will get it, but I also think you can make a movie that's convoluted and messy and weirdly organized and weirdly paced. That you would get the gist. You would get that there's this family, they need to go to this planet, spice is super important, and this kid is like potentially part of a prophecy and going to rise to power. Like I get all that stuff, but all the additional like context and relationships and like aside from Paul and Jessica and the Duke, I don't think I really knew who each character was. And the Baron, obviously I know him, but the rest of them, I'm like, I don't know exactly who you are or how you relate or who your equivalent is in the new version. I couldn't really place.
Yeah.
Are you in the new version? Are you Duncan Idaho? Who are you? I don't understand.
I felt kind of bad for the guy that played Duncan Idaho in this one, because Momoa plays him in the newer version. And the relationship in that version between him and Paul, instantly you're like, oh, yeah, this guy's got Paul's back. Like, they're close. This dude, he's loyal. Like, he is as loyal to this house as you can probably get. And spoiler, so many spoilers, guys. I'm so sorry for both versions. But his death in the 2021 version, although quick, has such a bigger impact on like the audience, or at least it had on me and on Paul, because Paul witnessed it, than seeing it in the 80s version where it was just like, write his character off because we have to move on real fast. Like, we're supposed to be already past this, and we're like, we got to get Paul his blue eyes. We got to get him in the desert. We got to get him writing. I felt like the 80s version. I feel like had I seen the 80s version before watching the 2021 one, I think I would have the same opinions. I don't think I would have connected to it. I think I would have still been very like, man, this movie just feels weird. And I don't know, like some of the effects I didn't mind. I liked the practical worms. I thought, hey, that's not bad. Like, they look okay. They look kind of silly, but they look okay.
Right.
What kind of bugged me
was larger tremors, basically.
Right. What did bother me a little bit was they did use like the same frame of a worm opening its mouth like 3 or 4 times in a row. And that was like, I noticed it immediately. Like, that's the same shot. They're just regurgitating that. I hate it when movies do this.
At least mirror it or something.
But they just kept doing it. It was like, oh God, guys. Like,
not tricking us at all.
Like, this is bad.
There's a lot of weird effects stuff. Like, the movie itself kind of feels gross for a lot of it, and that kind of is how the 80s went, though, with practical effects and stuff, which I don't mind terribly. But there's a lot of parts, and it's mostly with like I want to call them worms, but the worm, when you think of worms, you think of the sandworms. They're those the original in the beginning when those guys come in and they're talking to the emperor and like threatening him, and there's that thing in the tank, the giant tank,
weird
that they roll
floating
in, whatever
thing
that creature is.
Yeah,
the thing that floats
and
there.
The fucking close
and then later
up
there's
of
a
the
scene
mouth
when they the like wow vagina mouth. Later when they're doing the space traveling, there's this whole long extended sequence of that same kind of creature shooting laser beams out of its ass, and apparently that has something to do with bending space and using the spice. I'm not quite sure, but it was very long and very detailed, and this creature shoots lasers out of its butt a lot. And all of that was very unnecessary and weird and gross looking.
When that sequence started, because they do that weird like effect, what is it? Like inverted lighting or whatever on it, with the creature shooting the lasers out and the space blocks and the like little flashes going down the screen. And
accurate.
It was during that sequence, Jake, that I was like, I don't remember this in the book. Did I actually read the book this closely? I feel like I would have remembered this, but maybe I didn't. And then it went from that to like, do I have to rewatch the whole beginning of the movie again? Did I miss something important to explain why I'm suddenly watching this weird thing shooting weird light boxes, laser beams, whatever the hell?
Yeah.
Into the I was so lost, and the scene just kept going and
It
going
is long.
and
That's
going.
one of my like complaints is that there are I do think that if you're a huge Dune fan, there are some things in it that I felt like I did get more context out than I did in the other version. Not that's necessarily important, but kind of added a little more context. I was like, oh, I didn't really know that that's how that worked or what that was for or whatever. But most of the time, I was like, all of this extra stuff that wasn't in the original version, you don't really need. There's kind of a good reason it wasn't there. And I didn't know necessarily if this version was like a very faithful adaptation and the book had all of these weird things in it, or if it was David Lynch being weird, or what the story was, or if it was like, this is the 80s, it would be cool and sci-fi like, because a lot of this movie also feels like a very kind of generic sci-fi movie, like more
Yeah,
than
for
there's not a lot to set it apart from the others.
for being something that's supposed to be pretty iconic. I mean, the Dune book series is huge.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like a standard of sci-fi,
yeah.
like huge
And so
following.
the first film adaptation of it, you would imagine, is gonna be put up on a pedestal. Everything should be bigger, it's more care to it. And it did feel like, yeah, this feels like typical 80s sci-fi. It did make me think of like, there are aspects of it, not just the weird hand holding decisions and studio interference, but I did have moments of like, this feels like I'm thinking Blade Runner kind of stuff with this. I'm like, fucking Running Man effects are kind of running through my head with a couple of these scenes and like stuff like that. And it did feel like, yeah, that's just 80s sci-fi. There's some great 80s sci-fi, but this just feels weird. And then I had to laugh because I was like, dude, Doctor Who, a low budget British TV sci-fi show, all practical effects, all super cheesy practical effects, is kind of better executed in every aspect than this entire movie is doing right now.
Yeah.
And it's like a super cheap 80s show. Or it was in the 80s, folks. Like, not a lot of money in it in the 80s. There's a lot of money in it now. But
that's only because the following has gotten so huge over so many years. Yeah, I completely agree. There were a lot of, like, the books and the fandom are pretty huge. And so the scope, I think you would want to be very epic. And I think you get that in the new version. Denis Villeneuve's version is very epic. But in this one, it was like they wished it would be epic, but either didn't make it or couldn't make it for whatever limitation that way. There were a lot of times where just the action and stuff and the things, the filming and the editing and stuff was very claustrophobic and kind of tight in. Even when they're like in the middle of the desert, like it just felt like a very generic sci-fi, like locked in on them running through the sand kind of shot, and it's not terribly epic or open or swooping or anything. It's very just kind of, and there were times in the action like I would feel kind of lost of what exactly is going on. Like when Paul and Jessica are in they get to the desert for the first time and the sandworm's kind of chasing them. They end up in that cave, and then he somehow ends up falling out of the cave and like falling down a very great distance.
Like this huge cliffside that he goes down all the way, and you're like, oh, peril. And then he hops up and is like, ugh. and walks back up in like 10 steps and he's reunited with Jessica. And you're like,
I was so confused. I was like, I don't understand. Like I could not compute how far you were falling, how you got there, how you came out of the cave, how any of that stuff. Like it was just confusing. It didn't make any sense. And so it was just, there's a lot of that stuff where I was just kind of not really sure if this is how it should work or not, because it felt disjointed at best, I guess, and terrible at worst, I guess.
Yeah, it felt clunky. It felt very like soap opera-y to me a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, I think one of the biggest downfalls was actually Paul. I don't blame Kyle MacLachlan. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. That sounds right, but I will double check you
entirely for it. I mean, it was his first film, so
yeah, MacLachlan.
Sometimes debuts can be a little clunky or whatever. But just the development of his character, he goes from being just like potentially this prophesized man, who's supposed to be close to his father, but you don't really get that kind of sense that he's close to his dad. You do in the new one. Where they've got a close relationship. You get that. This one is just kind of like, hey, Dad. Hey, the sleeper must awaken. And you're like, oh, God damn it.
There's a lot of that.
But he just like, I never felt that there was actual development in his character. His character to me was just so like, oh shit, we still have to do something big with him. Give him the blue eyes. Okay, he's got the blue eyes. Like, that's what it felt like to me.
And none of it really felt earned.
No. And
it's just a lot of the stuff he was just kind of innately good at. And the rise to power was there was no payoff.
The rise to power. His fucking like inspirational speeches that he gives, the two I think that he gives, are just the most like, man, you fucking couldn't inspire a door to close. Like, you couldn't do shit.
Yeah.
And I was so like taken off guard. I don't know why, because when he first meets I can't remember her name, but
Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny, his lover.
Yeah.
When he first meets her, I was like, oh, there's going to be a weird sex scene, isn't there? Like, it just kind of flashed in the back of my head. And I think that's a David Lynch thing that I was like, it's going to get weird. Like, can we just let him be? Just let
this not.
Yeah. And then we got...
there was that, and then also, like, 5 minutes after he meets Chani, they're like making out
hardcore, and it was like,
we already talked about the pacing issues, but I'm like, what happened in the last 45 minutes of this movie?
You're like, I feel like there's a big chunk of story or character that might actually be important to why they're suddenly so like, hey, we're together.
Yeah, why are we in love all of a sudden?
But then it wasn't the weirdest sex scene. It's just such a unnecessary topless makeout scene.
There have been much weirder sex scenes. It wasn't awful, but
it wasn't awful.
It was unnecessary.
So unnecessary. and then they announced like, oh, he's got a sister, which was a moment that I was like, oh, so that's coming up in part 2 in March. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I didn't remember that. That's exactly the thought I had, because I was like, part of me was like, is this going to be in the next version? Is this like a real thing that needs to happen? Or is he just going to toss that out and be like, we don't need that. We'll just focus on Paul. But then I rewatched the newer version of Dune, and they definitely start teasing it. Like Paul points out, I know you're pregnant and all that stuff. She's like, how could you possibly know? And all this stuff. I was like, and then there's a flashback where she's holding a baby. And I was like, oh shit, they're going to do this. Little girl, that sister is going to show up in the next one. That's going to be so weird.
It'll be very weird.
Better.
It'll probably be done little bit better because her weird, creepy whisper voice thing that she does was like, what?
It took me forever. I watched this 2 times all the way through, and then I kind of sort of watched it a third time while I was kind of piecemealing and making notes and all this stuff. And I didn't realize until that third time I was like, oh my god, she's doing the voice. Like that's when they talk about use the voice to control people.
Right.
That's their version of that. I was like, oh, now I get it, because it really didn't come across. She's like, tell them who I am, or whatever she does. It's so
I felt
weird.
like the voice and the weapon of sound, which was something that
Mm-hmm.
so they changed a lot in the new one. So I want to bounce around a little bit. Sorry, my brain is like, dude, don't forget about
That's all good.
the weirding module compared to the weirding way.
Yeah.
In the newer one, I like the weirding way, the fighting style in the newer one. I think that's a cooler way of portraying this kind of new form. The module was just like, okay. And then the whole like their weapon of the chaka or whatever sounds they're using. I couldn't take a single moment of that serious. And then he has that fucking line, dude, where he's like, the one dude uses his name that he chooses for himself as the weapon.
Yeah.
And he had that stupid fucking inner monologue of like, a name is a weapon.
My name is a killing word.
Or a killing machine. Yeah, it was like, oh.
Yeah, I did not really care for any of that. The whole so before, when I said that it feels like very generic sci-fi, that was kind of a big part of it. Was the whole movie is the only weapons they use are kind of like laser guns, which is one of the reasons I liked the new Dune so much. And I was very, if you've heard me talk about it, I praised it a lot, especially when I first saw it. I was like, this movie is incredible. I loved every minute of watching it. I wish it never stopped running. And I've questioned if that was hyperbole and if I've cooled off on it since then, but I just rewatched it the other night and I was like, this movie's fucking great. I was absolutely right. It's really good. And a lot of the reason I really like it is because of kind of the mix of ancient and future, like to be in the 10,000 years future, but it's still a very classic human story of dukes and barons and emperors. And so I really liked the future, and they still use like swords and shields, and even though they're, body shields and stuff, I thought that was really cool. So it set it apart, I guess, from other sci-fi in that way. Whereas this version, they have these laser guns, and that's all they really use. And then they use that like voice activated laser guns, and it feels very much like wouldn't this be cool and futuristic to do? And it's really not. Like if I had a gun that I had to be like chaka to make it shoot, I would feel like an idiot, and I would never do it. I would
never use it. Yeah, no. I just kept. I couldn't take it.
No matter how powerful it is.
It was so cringe, and I don't have like a specific scene or like a specific line of dialogue or anything, but what it reminded me of was like the adults in South Park whenever they get upset about stuff as a group and they shout rabble, 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 or they start just yelling nonsense at each other that's incoherent. That's what their voice activated guns like reminded me of.
Especially in the big battle when everybody's going chaka, chaka, chaka,
chaka, chaka, chaka. Yeah. That's what
exactly
it reminded me of.
The battle is like.
Could not take it serious. I was shaking my head the whole time thinking like it's gotta end soon, and then it's like and then we move to the next battle and they do it again, and you're like, stop, just stop.
Yeah. That was amazing. I did not care for those devices, and I was really curious. I was like, is this canon? Is this a thing that they have to do in part 2 of Dune? How are they going to make it better? Because there's no way they're going to do that. I'm so curious now.
I'm looking it up.
Fact check.
Let's see here. The plot is almost beat for beat the same as the book. Unfortunately, because the film is an entirely different medium from the novel, a lot of the nuances from Frank Herbert's work are lost in translation. No shit.
Thanks a lot, news source.
It looks like it's considered to be a typical book to film adaptation.
Okay.
Which means
we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, which means it's not actually accurate, except it maintained the basic story.
The spirit of it. One of the other things that I wonder if they'll do and in what way they'll do it, and hopefully it will make more sense in the next version, is the water of life stuff.
Oh, yeah, the poisoned water.
Yeah, and they kind of allude to it in the first part of the movie, and then it doesn't come back until way later, until you're like, oh yeah, I think they mentioned this before. And so they haven't mentioned it in the first part of Dune, and that's why I wonder if it'll be in the second part at all, or if they'll just explain it in a different way. But the water of life part was weird, and I think it kind of ties back into what you were saying about Paul's character and how he doesn't really grow or pay off in any significant way, because he just kind of decides that it's important and he needs to take it. And so they walk out into the desert and he lies down and they like tie him to the ground. And then he drinks this water, which you learn is the bile of a young sandworm. And that sounds super gross, but it like takes him on this trip, and he sees a bunch of visions and then decides a bunch of stuff. But it's none of it's like super new information. It feels like it's just, it's supposed to be like when he kind of comes into his own and
I kind of
gains all of his power and influence and stuff.
I kind of took it. It reminded me of like Black Panther, where they drink that potion from the flower, and that's what like sends them into that other world for the trance, and then they're given the power of the panther. That's what I
didn't remember that being part of Black Panther at all, but I believe you. Yes, sounds the same.
It was essentially the same thing, which made me think of like, good job, Black Panther. But the comic books are old, so okay.
Yeah.
But what confused me the most about that, besides him just kind of like suddenly being like, my destiny is to drink this water so that I can prove I am the prophecy. And I was like, okay. Like,
because nobody's ever done it. They've all died.
No one's ever done it, which is such an obvious, like, well, clearly he will be the one to do it. Like, this won't be a shocking moment when it comes up. But what kind of took me off guard was they tie him down for no reason at all.
Yeah, he doesn't like struggle or like, it's not like, he doesn't seem like he would have been a danger to them or himself or whatever if Willow was going through it. He just kind of lays there and has a nice dream about some stuff. Floating, he like
quickly
space.
Yells, and then he comes up and he's like, the mystery of the sandworms, they are the spice.
What is their relationship? Now I'm starting to sound like Christian Bale's Batman. What is their relationship?
Almost. If he's like trying to do ASMR or something like that.
Yeah.
They are the spice.
The worms are the spice. Which still didn't really explain it. I was like, maybe this will give me more background into what the spice is. I was like, does the worms make it? Is it worm shit? Is it like what is, and then I'm like sitting here, what is their relationship? This asks some interesting questions, and then it never really answered.
Spice like their skin cells that fall off, like that's the dust.
Yeah, could be the skin flakes for sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, all we can do is speculate at this point.
But which would be kind of gross if you think about it, because they run around and lay in the sand a lot in that desert. You're like, ew.
Yeah,
it's kind of gross.
Well, they consume the spice,
and they consume it, and they're like, that's yuck. But
Have you heard that like a lot of the dust in your house is skin
it's
flakes?
your skin. Yeah.
So it's basically like that. You're just breathing in spice, but it's your skin instead.
Yeah. No wonder I'm
It
not
does no
getting magical
magical,
powers all of a sudden.
yeah, no magical properties, but it's the same thing.
And that may have I might be jumping ahead, but I was a little confused by the sudden god-like figure that Paul is.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, people are like very quick to follow him and be like super into it. That was the kind of the transition point that I was the most confused about, because in the new version, obviously they have the big knife fight, and he like, it's kind of the point where he becomes a man. His father recently died, spoiler alert, and then he kills a man for the first time, spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
But that's kind of where he like becomes a man in that sense. There isn't that moment in this movie. He just kind of meets the Fremen, and they're like, "Hey, what's up? We have all this water, and we want you to come join us. Feel free. Like, we know we don't know you, and you're a stranger, but just come join our group. Actually, why don't you lead our group right now? That would be great.
Like, you know,
we've been looking for a leader, and
the
we're
leader
taking applications,
of the Fremen
and you're the only
tells
one.
Paul, you have to lead this group. I can't do it. You're the leader.
Yeah,
like
yeah, very low self-esteem on that guy.
Yeah, it's a good thing you got the numbers behind you, because this is terrible right now.
Yeah, no power struggle, no actual like, I don't know, threshold for him to cross. He just kind of is the leader all of a sudden, and the same way that is in love with Chani all of a sudden, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, he does become kind of that godlike figure. I mean, granted, if you're teaching people to destroy rock and blow up buildings with your voice, that's kind of a big godlike thing to do.
The whole like, this is the strongest stone on your planet, hit it. Like, no.
Yeah,
now kick
even the weakest stone on my planet, I'm not going to break with my hand. Can we move on?
And I like that he actually does hit it, and then he kicks it, and then he's like, no, yell at it. Like, now watch me.
Yeah, see, I have this microphone around my neck, and it really makes my voice sound waves destroy the stone in this very specific way. Yeah, I didn't love that. The other, like, I guess one of the possibly interesting things, but also partly unnecessary things that aren't in the new version, is all of the stuff with the Emperor himself. You never see the Emperor in the new version.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if that's going to end up being like a big part of part 2. I actually thought I would not be shocked if part 2 starts with this kind of Emperor stuff, where you find out the Emperor has been plotting all of this stuff with the Harkonnen.
Yeah. They
kind of hiring them
they
to
kind
do
of
all
like
of this.
They kind of suspect all the characters and the House Arrakis and all of them. They kind of suspect that maybe the Emperor supports them, but is setting them up to fail. They're not quite sure. But yeah, it does kind of directly come out in the beginning of this movie that I'm going to tell Harkonnen to leave and give up the spice, even though they've gotten super rich on it, and they're the enemies of this other people that I'm replacing it with. But then I'm going to let them come back in and kill them and all this other stuff. Like, they just let it all
right.
out.
But then we're going to kill all of them. They're like, just kill the kid.
Yeah. And then this other group is like the scariest villain of the movie are these people that like control the Emperor, and don't really know who they are. They weren't in the slideshow at the beginning that describes all of the people you need to care about. They weren't like, there's this other shadowy government part. This, like, they just show up and they're like, hey, Emperor, you need to do this, or we noticed you're doing this. Why are you doing this? And he's like, well, I have a plan, you see, and my plan is to turn these two houses against each other because Arrakis has a lot of support and they might overtake me, see? And and they're like, yeah, that sounds great, but you should also kill the son. Paul needs to die. And yeah, you don't know how they know that.
And you get the Emperor's inner monologue of, I wonder why they want to kill the boy.
Yeah, surely they mean the actual Duke. And they're like, no, definitely the boy.
Like, no, his name's Paul. Kill Paul.
Yeah, Paul. We said Paul. We meant Paul.
Have you killed Paul yet? No. Damn it, Emperor.
You had one job. They might be related to like the Bene Gesserit witchy people. Are they?
I don't know if they're related or they have some form of connection to them. I don't know that I would say they're
because they have like a kind of similar motives that they don't want Paul to exist, or if he exists, they really want to be able to control him or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess they don't really want him dead, so maybe they're not the same group. But they're all very dark, kind of have the same team colors, so you kind of see why I got them mixed up. A lot of black goth.
Their team uniforms are a little too similar, so
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I didn't see any.
I wrote in my notes that they're
insignia, so
I wrote in my notes that they're Borg-looking dudes to tie it back to another.
Oh yeah, they are kind of Borg-looking.
Yeah.
All right.
Not as like robotic, but same sort of aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad analogy. Yeah.
Okay.
Been a minute since I thought about the Borgs. Wow. Wasn't Tom Hardy a Borg in
what?
I think it's Star Trek Nemesis, right? Now,
Nemesis?
Fact checking Tom Hardy. I'm pretty positive.
Oh, you're right. He was.
Fuck yeah, I'm right.
Nemesis was the last original. Oh, I guess New Generation movie, right?
Yeah.
Before we did the reboot. I like Star Trek, but I'm not the hugest nerd about Star Trek.
Right.
But that sounds right. Yeah, I didn't know that Tom Hardy was in it. Good for him.
Yeah. He's like real young and not jacked yet.
That's a random factoid, and yeah, that's absolutely right. I googled it. I was like, "Damn, Tom Hardy's thin. He's thin AF."
And back to Dune. So Dune's the fucking vagina mouth weird creature, which is also the same creature that they do the weird light show with the lasers out of its
light
ass.
Boxes, laser blast, laser butt. Yeah,
he's like. Or it, I don't know what it is. It pops up a couple times.
Don't give it a gender.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume the gender.
You gotta ask.
It does have a male voice, though. But it does have a vagina mouth. So who the fuck knows what's going on with that thing?
It's a mix.
Out weird, like, red smoke, misty crap.
Yeah.
That of all the choices made in this movie, the close-ups of the mouth might be the weirdest decision made.
Yeah. I don't know the point of them. It's like I get that it's talking already. Like I understand that.
I don't need a close-up of the mouth. And then you find yourself being like, man, I feel like we've been looking at this mouth spitting out this weird red liquid mist stuff for a while. Can we move on?
For a while. Yeah. Any amount of time looking at that mouth is too much, in my opinion.
And you are forced to stare at it. It's like center screen.
Oh, yeah. Zoomed in.
Yeah. Like
big time. Yeah, it's not like a close-up of a normal person talking where it's like full face. It's like, no, just this thing. Just the vagina mouth. Just so you know, it's talking, I guess. It's weird.
It's so fucking weird.
It's also weird how many different people have super massive bushy eyebrows. Like, it was like,
The
are they
fashion sense
related?
of Dune.
Are they related to each other? Or is it just like the fashion of the whole planet is big eyebrows and eyelashes and stuff? Eyebrows specifically. That they're so bushy and the hairstyles are kind of
I
similar
mean, the
on all those
hairstyles are
Harkonnen
very
dudes.
80s, but the
Yeah.
eyebrows are on a whole nother level. They're like,
Yeah.
it's like Martin Scorsese has been competing with the eyebrows in Dune his entire life. And
aspiring to be them.
yeah, and he is older than all of them, but his eyebrows just can't keep up.
No, he'll never achieve massively long and bushy eyebrows.
Especially with Brad Dourif's eyebrows. His are crazy huge for such a small face.
Curl. They're weird.
I had to laugh at his character because I was like, is he trying to play Wormtongue in this one? Like, he's doing the same kind of shit, but worse. And then I thought, can you just get to being an evil doll and like trying to kill people? Like, this is a terrible role, dude.
It could be more intimidating. We already know that from future projects. When he's allowed to be.
When he's allowed to be.
I'm sure it wasn't his fault.
Either way. Oh, man. I was looking up stills of just like the gross hair designs and all this, and the very first picture that popped up was the weird sex scene between Paul and what's her bucket?
Yeah. Chani,
thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of weird scenes, not really a sex scene, but also weirdly sexual, is we promised to get to Sting. I guess now's as good a time as any. Sting is in this movie, the musical artist Sting.
Yep.
From The Police.
He is.
He doesn't do a lot until he comes out of like a sauna thing in a banana hammock with wings on it. It's like a little man bikini, but it's got wings on the sides. And it's like brown or black and leathery and like weirdly shaped. Not that I was looking at it for a super long time. I didn't pause it and zoom in and stuff, but the Baron is like fixated on it to a point when you like the holds the shot on the Baron. He's like raising an eyebrow, kind of intrigued by this. And I was like, why are we doing this? Does this matter? Why are we holding this shot so long? Why did Sting just come out of a sauna with no clothes on except for this banana hammock? And
apparently, ow, sorry, I had something in my eye. Apparently, he was supposed to be completely nude for when he came out, but then the studio was like, we don't need to see Sting's junk. So maybe we don't have him come out nude. And their compromise was, well, we still want him to come out pretty naked. So we're going to give him... He needs
to be as naked as possible. That is what we need.
So we're going to give him this covering that it has wings.
Yeah. It's futuristic.
It's futuristic because it's black, kind of shiny, and has wings. Yeah. It's not formed like normal.
It's the underwear of the future.
Underwear. Yeah. I was like, having never seen this movie until now, but growing up, it was like kind of a movie that I had overheard about. People always like you would hear comments about this Dune. I think it's got a pretty big, like, I want to say following or fanship or whatever to it, even though it, in my opinion, wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But I remembered this was another one that my dad would make fun of, and particularly because like Sting is in Dune. Like he's the most memorable thing from anyone who's ever seen this movie was like, well, Sting's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having like going into it, I was expecting Sting to be overused, right?
Yeah.
Like because it's Sting. And in the 80s,
Right.
the Police, I mean, this is huge. I figured he was going to walk around singing Roxanne or SOS the whole fucking time. Thank God he does not, because those are terrible songs. Don't at me. They suck.
I prefer the, I almost said Night at the Roxbury. No, the other musical. Never mind. I was going to make a joke. That's the version with Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor, and they're in a musical, and Roxanne and
Moulin Rouge?
Moulin Rouge, thank you. Yes. The moment is past. Move on.
It did pass, but now, I mean, I've made some weird leaps and connections before, Jake.
I like Moulin Rouge, weird. And he sings Roxanne because she's like a hooker, and they're like, Roxanne.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yes, yeah, right. That's one of the songs they use.
That's right.
And but that has nothing to do with this movie, so never mind.
But
Sting
going into it, I thought Sting was going to have a more prominent role or do something.
Yeah, he does do something. He has the quintessential climax of the movie with the knife fight.
With like the lamest knife fight I think ever put on film.
Yeah, it is unfortunate on all levels. Like it hurts significantly that we're watching this in 2024 after the new version, which has a very good knife fight with a lot of meaning behind it and a lot of stakes set up.
I was going to say it feels like the stakes are high, whereas the stakes in this one, the old one, the movie's already concluded. You know exactly like
right. Yeah, we've had this whole epic tale of this man who rose to power and took back the whole planet, and he invaded the Harkonnens and defeated them in battle, and now they're all in the throne room, surrounded by tons and tons of dudes that he's recruited, way more than they have. Literal sandworms that he controls,
right,
and has brought to their doorstep. And now he's going to have a knife fight with Sting. And I mean, what's the worst that happens if he dies at this point? He goes down as like a legend that already won.
If he died, wouldn't that just escalate the godlike aspect of Paul that everyone already has? He himself,
a martyr,
yeah,
a Messiah or whatever.
But like, there's no way Paul's gonna lose. You already know this, and then you get the knife fight.
Yeah, and it's not well organized or choreographed or edited in the sense that Sting is just kind of like a cocky douche in it and starts winning very briefly, very early on, and then loses very quickly also. Like it's a very short and uneventful knife fight to be the end of the movie.
It's so like anticlimactic for a story that should have like continuous climaxes that's coming to it. Like everything feels so important and so like vital to the story of Paul, or at least it should. This one you kind of feel like, I feel like this was supposed to be important. We're just glossing right over it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I felt like Sting being in this was such a pointless cameo before cameos were like trendy and really cool. I don't. It's like, why the fuck is Sting even in this?
Although it is random.
His hair is kind of cool. It reminds me of like the vocalist from the band Power Man 5000. It's like that super spiky blonde hair that he's got going on. That's kind of
okay.
Cool. I'll take that. But
if you say so.
I
know exactly what he looks like. I would not put it on a list of cool hairstyles, though.
Well, it works for Power Man 5000.
Okay.
It
How
works
many
for them.
people
It's
in the
cool for them. I didn't say it was cool for. I kind of said it
it's
was
not cool in the sense that anybody else wants that
right.
hairstyle.
Like it only works for like futuristic
I
new
think you're
metal band.
I think you're confusing cool with people tolerate it who are fans of Power Man
You know what?
5000.
It
They're like,
works for the
okay,
band. It
he's
works for him.
this is the guy. We will accept his hair because we like everything else about him.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's his choices, and nobody else wants a piece of it.
You know what, Jake? I don't even know
I
why I was trying to argue you. You're right. You're
you
right.
you said that it was the only redeeming quality of Sting, which good for you for trying to find a redeeming quality for his cameo. I guess I shouldn't have taken that away from you.
Bastard.
Um, I was scrolling through stills of on IMDb of the movie just to kind of remember everything that's going on. Part of the reason I was confused about who was who, I think, and who was related is because so many of the Harkonnen have red hair. They're like all gingers in space for some reason. And a lot of them, in addition to wearing their like black vinyl outfits, have like a shade, like a reverse mohawk, like a shaved bald spot down the middle of their head. And it's very, very odd. But the Baron does not have a shaved thing. He just has boils all over his face and very
He's
bushy
just
eyebrows like
gross.
everybody else.
Just
And
gross.
then there's the guy that looks so similar. Like they all are gingers. It's so weird to me. But I guess maybe they're all like an inbred race or something. I don't really get it. But then the guy that uh, he walks in the room and finds a decapitated head and like has an emotional reaction to it. But I didn't have an emotional reaction because I was like, who the fuck is that guy? I don't understand who just died. Number one, I didn't see them die.
That was Sting's like partner guy who gets his head hacked
But you
off.
never see him get beheaded, do you?
No,
you
don't.
Away?
His head's just
okay.
there because that's like them punishing the Baron for not killing Paul right away.
Okay. So yeah, he you walk in and there's a ginger head that's severed, and I'm like, who's this? And the Baron's very upset about it. But yeah, they all are ginger, all very weird looking, and I cannot get over the fact that the Baron was so misused as like a villain, because like the terribly green rooms, the floating and the cackling. He does so much laughing in this movie as like it's not like an intimidating laugh. It's like a giggly.
It's like he's constantly trying to do some weird form of a maniacal laugh, but it just comes across like sad.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, very sad. Not intimidating at all.
It's like, okay, dude, can you just float around? Yeah, I just kept wanting someone to like trip one of the little things that makes him float so that he'll like make farting sounds while like spinning around in the air and like fly through. Uh-huh. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but that's kind of what I was hoping would happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I stand by what I feel though of like them putting all the boils and stuff like that kind of close up with the doctor like peeling them and giving the Baron like his adoration for him or whatever. He's like, I felt that was such a unnecessary, like, we need to gross the audience out or get them to understand how bad he is. So we'll make him just so disgusting. And you're like, it's kind of distracting because I don't remember the dialogue during that. I was just kind of like focused on how gross he was.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. It really doesn't do his character any sort of favors as far as getting his character across or his motives across or any sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's not intimidating or anything. It is just super gross.
I kind of forgot about the weird, because it has those weird like shots of the space where they're doing the like lasery lights or whatever, the swirls.
Yeah.
But then the random hand that keeps like coming up onto the screen. I was very confused about the hand on the screen.
Like, that felt like a very David Lynch.
That was
like
a very
superimposing this thing coming out of nowhere. It felt like the beginning of Mulholland Drive, basically. The credits.
Like, all right, this doesn't serve any purpose, does it?
Yeah. Oh, there's a great photo on IMDb of Sting and his banana hamburger. Saving that right now. My wife's gonna find this and be like, "What the fuck are you into?
Like, what is wrong with you?"
It's for the podcast, I promise. I did think that trying to find some positives. Generally, yes, I dislike this movie, and I think it failed on pretty much every front that it should have set out to succeed.
Yeah.
But as far as positives go, I did enjoy there's an interesting couple of quick shots of the fetus, the unborn fetus, unborn daughter inside of Jessica.
Yeah.
The way it's like shot and framed, I hadn't really seen anything like that. And I was like, that's kind of cool. That's interesting. It looked very practical and good overall. I thought quite a bit, not everything, but I thought quite a bit of the actual space shots and the ships traveling and moving and
the ships traveling through space, I thought actually looked pretty good, especially being 80s. I agree with you. That first shot of him like actually flying through, I had that thought of just like, oh, that looks cleaner than most sci-fi in this time period actually would have looked. So good on you. I know I've been like trashing it quite a bit. There were moments, like I said earlier, I don't blame David Lynch entirely for the stuff that I did not like in this movie. I really feel like the studio probably had their as many hands in the cookie jar as humanly possible.
For sure.
And that's a shame. But there were like the beginning of it, I did not mind. I didn't mind the pacing, with Paul kind of like learning, his mom having the Benny, what are they called? Jesuit, like the head mother of that showing up to the house to give him the test and all that. I thought that was done fairly well. I didn't mind all of that. I didn't even mind some of the casting. I thought like some of the casting was pretty well done. The worms effects, I like the practical effects of the worms. I thought, hey, there are some positives in it. And I think if you're a fan of the book series or a fan of the 2021 version, you can still find stuff in this one that you're like, it's not the absolute worst. Does it make a lot of weird decisions? Yeah, it makes about 2 hours and 17 minutes worth of weird decisions, but
that's the whole runtime of the movie.
Right. But it's not the worst sci-fi. It's not even the worst David Lynch out there.
For sure.
I would much rather watch this over Mulholland Drive any day of the week. Like, it wouldn't even be a contest for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't hate the original Dune by any means. I just felt the pacing was just a big issue for me, and I just felt some of the decision making just a little too weird. Like, I think it got in its own way. I think every part of this movie, from David Lynch not being allowed to have final cut, which means he's approaching this project with a mentality of it is what it is. I'll just make what I can, I guess. The production being as terrible as he alludes to, because he doesn't talk about it. He's refused to talk about it. And that's got to be terrible if the director or the writer and director refuses to talk about the movie he wrote and directed. Like,
right.
Something's real rotten there. I just think it had too many variables going against it. all maybe had the right intention, but all got in its own way. I think that was the ultimate failure of this whole Dune. Thank God for the new one. I'm just gonna keep saying
it's infinitely superior in every way. I think only the truest diehard Dune fans and cult classic fans of this movie would find value in it. Really, that there are additional things that I'm sure are true to the book that are in this movie that are not in the new version. And so I think that I could see people liking it for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with everything that you said pretty much. I think there are definitely pacing problems overall. And like I said, there are things that happen way too quickly and things that don't pay off and things that feel like they must have been cut out of the longer version. But at the same time, I don't think I would want to watch a 4-hour version of this.
Right.
Like, even if it established better stakes and characters and payoffs and things in that story, a lot of the other stuff is way too weird and awkward and pointless, and it focuses on things that don't really matter in a handful of times that I'm like, 4 hours isn't enough. Like, cut it, or like, is too much. Cut it down to the bare essentials to tell the best story possible. And I think that's what the new version does. So why would I bother?
And I think the new version kind of looked at the mistakes of the 80s, and I could be wrong, but in my opinion, looked at the mistakes and then we're like, we can tell the same story. Because you said, I mean, the pacing during the first act is pretty similar. Like, they do a lot of the very similar, if not the same thing. But I think that it's a rare moment where the studios learned a mistake from the previous one of like, instead of trying to cram this whole epic story into one 2-hour film, maybe we do split it. That way there is an actual, we can show development. We can let the story actually kind of get fleshed out a little bit.
I'm sure that there's the benefit of hindsight on this and learning from the mistakes of it, and not only breaking it up into 2 parts, but also I think they didn't focus on a lot of stuff that's in this version, like the Emperor stuff and the weird wormy vagina mouth monsters and the laser beams and the space travel sequences and just long drawn out vision sequences and stuff, and instead focused on character and their family and the motivations and the background and still splicing in visions and things, but in a way that's like kind of quick and move on and you get the gist and it'll come back in the future kind of things. Don't worry about it.
I think the payoff will be so much better because we're invested in these characters. We're invested in Paul. We've gotten to actually watch him kind of get forced to become a man. You know, he's like, he watched his dad get killed. Well, not watched his dad, but he knows his dad was betrayed and murdered. His house was completely destroyed. Him and his mom are like, their lives are wanted. He knows the danger and the stakes are constantly there chasing him. So we as the audience have kind of gotten the chance to actually invest into his story to see where he's going to go. Granted, we know where he's going to go now, but I'm excited to see this character grow up even more and kind of become Muad'Dib or whatever his name is.
That sounds right.
I'm excited, and I think Timothée Chalamet is actually a good choice for Paul. I think the age is really good to be pretty young and to like kind of be forced to learn how to be an older, seasoned man in a younger body almost. You know what I mean? Like, he's being forced to grow up, but his actual age is pretty young.
It reminds me of so many famous conquerors and generals and things. They were shockingly young, like in the grand scheme of things, like when they were major generals in major wars and they were like 17 years old at the time. And it's pretty amazing. And I kind of get the same vibe. I like this about this character and how it kind of ties, even though it's 10,000 years in the future, it still feels accessible and familiar in the human story of it.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. I think in the future, the story will pay off so much better in the next version because of the time we've had with the characters, and not just Paul, but I couldn't get over how incredible Rebecca Ferguson's casting was for Jessica, like as his
she's
mom.
so perfect.
She's perfectly like maternal, but you get her like kind of witchy vibe on the side.
Well, she's so mysterious in general. Like to me, so my introduction to her, my real introduction to Rebecca Ferguson was The Greatest Showman and then Mission Impossible. And her characters are kind of shady in both stories. Granted, The Greatest Showman's like this
unknown motivations
musical, but her motivation is a little not right. And then in Mission Impossible, you question her the whole time. So to see her in Dune, where like she is under scrutiny because everyone's like, we don't know if we actually can trust her. I mean,
and she's kind of broken the rules having a son she's not supposed to.
She plays it great. So for me, automatically when I saw her in the newer Dune the first time, it was instant like, I don't think I'm supposed to trust you, but I don't know. You are a mother, which means I'm going to trust you on principle.
And she's the wife of the Duke, but she doesn't really feel like a duchess. And then you're like, oh no, you're just his concubine, really.
And that was one thing that I do actually remember prominently from the book was because they spent a lot of time talking about it, is that because she's not actually married to the Duke, and the kind of like everyone holds her at a little bit of a distance. Everyone's a little on edge when she's around. So I thought that paid off in the movie really, really well. Whereas in the old Dune, she's just kind of like there and everyone's like, we love Jessica. And you're like, I don't remember them loving Jessica. Like, Paul loves Jessica.
Yeah.
But he still questions her. Like, weird things. But yes, Rebecca Ferguson is amazing. I love her.
Yeah, she's great.
Fucking Brad Dourif and his weird eyebrows. I'm looking at stills as well.
There's even bigger than I remember. Like, dude, I was scrolled through and saw stills. I was like, oh my God.
I told you, Martin Scorsese's eyebrows will never be able to achieve that kind of status.
No. They've got to get like 3 times bigger in order to get that big. It's wild. What else? Oh my God, that's a Virginia Madsen?
Yeah, that was the craziest. Like, it's super young Virginia Madsen.
Her face changes so much as she gets older. I guess it gets like longer.
Yeah, the principal from Kindergarten Cop show up for like 2 scenes.
Yeah, everybody knows that person.
Max von Dow is in it. Patrick Stewart. Oh, I already said Patrick Stewart. I know you haven't seen it yet, Jake, but the Duke is played by the actor who plays Sutter Kane in The Mouth of Madness, which made me laugh because Sutter Kane is like a mysterious kind of devious character in The Mouth of Madness. So it made me laugh when he showed up as like this super respectable Duke.
Noble.
Yeah. I was like, ooh, don't trust him.
That's funny. Yeah, I recognize Linda Hunt immediately. She's the super short lady. She's in Silverado is mostly what I know her from. Normal people probably know her from The Incredibles as like the lady that makes their costumes.
Yeah.
Is like her style. She kind of looks like that lady. But she dies like immediately. She's the housekeeper lady.
Like 2 scenes-ish.
Yeah.
Scene and a half.
Yeah, the most famous people in this movie have like 2 scenes.
Yeah. Fucking eyebrows, man. Fucking eyebrows. I don't really have too much more.
Nah, I think that's it. It's hard with these these movies we don't care a lot about, because I feel like we talked about everything in the movie, but it doesn't go as long as a normal episode does.
Sometimes it's there's your shot of the baby.
Oh, baby in the tummy.
Yeah,
I did
the
think that
baby
was
in
cool.
the tummy.
The baby.
The baby.
The dingo ate your baby.
Oh God. Dude, the blue eyes. What a terrible like special effect that they did in post for that.
Yeah, it wasn't even like, I'm sure they knew how to make like blue contacts back then, but they were like, no, we'll just make them kind of glow.
It'll look real bad.
Yeah.
But we got this. So
yeah, a lot of weird choices.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I don't really have too much else, or really anything else. I'd say it's still, if you're a fan, if you haven't seen it, but you're a fan of like the new one, it's worth watching just to kind of see the scope of the story. Maybe wait till after part 2 comes out for the new one.
Yeah, if you want to experience the story in the best way possible and you didn't read the books, I think definitely wait till after the second part to go back to this, just so that none of it gets like ruined for you. And then also, I would say you would probably you would enjoy it more, or at least tolerate it more, if you like 80s B movie quality sci-fi stuff, because a lot of it felt like that. I was like, this should be a big budget epic sci-fi story just based on how huge Dune seems to be as a book series and stuff, but this felt kind of B movie scope, which is part of the disappointment. It's not epic at all. So if you don't mind B movie weird sci-fi stuff, then you would, I think, like this movie more, or at least not criticize it as much.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I guess it was like a positive to not absolutely hate it. It is from David Lynch, and I'm just not a David Lynch fan.
The best David Lynch movie so far that you've seen.
It's true. I know, like, people have recommended Eraserhead a lot.
Yeah.
But
I hear that, and I hear The Elephant Man because it's apparently his most normal movie.
Okay.
But I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either. I'm kind of worried to ask. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think David Lynch is, some people are huge fans of like the Tim Burton style, or like a David Fincher style or whatever. All these different characters that have very specific feels and looks to their films.
Strong
and the way they
style
tell it.
filmmakers.
Yeah. I think you're always going to have people that are just not fans of them. I know you're not the biggest Tim Burton fan.
Right.
And that's fair. He's not for everyone. I don't think David Lynch is for everyone. I kind of feel like, and I don't mean to generalize, but I kind of feel like David Lynch is more for wannabe art house fans. Like,
yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think his appeal is way more narrow than a lot of other filmmakers, even with super strong styles like Tim Burton or Wes Anderson or Zack Snyder or all of these people that have hugely strong styles, pretty divisive. I think he's just so specific, and if you fall into that category of liking it, great, but most people won't.
But your general audience, I feel, actually doesn't. I kind of actually question if like the dedicated fan base is actually dedicated, or if they just say that to sound like for fear of being attacked by the
Lynch mob.
Ba-dum-bum-bum.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Yeah, there it was. But I didn't hate it. I just, I did have to laugh. I was like, I know Jake and I have talked about, like, man, we do a lot of sci-fi on these deep dives. And here we are doing another one. I had to laugh that you brought that up earlier. It's like, yep, we're 14 days. 14 days into 2024 at the time of recording right now, and I've watched two weird ass fucking sci-fi movies. One that I absolutely loved, and one that I'm very like, if I don't watch it again, that's okay.
Yeah. You win some, you lose some.
It's true, but that's okay. Maybe I'll just get you to watch. We'll do a deep dive on like another straight drama or something, and I'll make you watch a movie that'll.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, we should take a break from sci-fi for a little bit. As much as I love it, I do want to share the love, and drama would be good. We could get deep in a horror movie or something else. There's lots of good options.
Oh, I have ideas. Don't worry. I have.
Oh, good.
I have a couple ideas, but I
like that.
That's for later. But
okay,
if you've seen the original Dune and loved it or whatever, and thought Jake and I are absolutely out of our minds for not thinking it was all that, let us know why you loved it so much. Is it just because of nostalgia? Is it just that was the one that you grew up with, so that's the one that you connect with or whatever? Let us know. We're curious. If you're
not opposed to being persuaded. That's happened to me before where I'm like, I left a theater and I'm like, that movie sucked. And then I go home and read a bunch of comments and I'm like, oh no, I was wrong. Actually, it was brilliant. I just didn't get it immediately. So maybe that could happen. I'm always open to the option.
It can happen. If you're part of the David Lynch diehard fan base, I'm sure we pissed you off, and sorry.
Not sorry.
Yeah. I'm sure you've probably already vocalized yourselves on hating Jake and I's fan base for Zack Snyder, so we'll call it even, huh?
It happens all the time. That we're very aware of the fact that some of our favorite movies everybody else hates. So
it's true.
If you love this movie and we don't, it doesn't take it away from you at all.
Right. You can still enjoy it, we promise.
Yeah,
so thank you, everybody. If you're new to the show, I know we've got a whole slew of new followers and all that. Appreciate you. Welcome. Join the conversation. Let us know what you think of all these movies that we talk about and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, and we have a lot of new stuff coming up, but if you have any ideas that you want to see or hear about, definitely let us know if you have any episode ideas.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that only a few people have actually taken advantage of. If there's a movie that you don't think Jake and I have seen before that we should, let us know. Chances are we will watch it and dedicate a whole episode to it.
Those are some of our favorites where we both haven't seen it before and get to go in fresh, kind of like this. We've had a lot of really interesting ones like that.
It's true. So let us know. Episode ideas. We're down to hear your thoughts and suggestions. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you.
Yep.
I think that's it.
And I think that's it too. Oh, next episode after this is actually the first annual Movie Boners Awards.
Oh, shit.
Get ready for that. We've been cramming movies from last year, and we'll cast a verdict on what the best and worst and other fun categories of the year were next time.
Very excited for that. So be a part of that, because I'm sure there will be some hot takes tossed out there. We like to do that. So So thank you again, everyone.
All right. Talk to you guys next time.
Bye.